Today we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. If you're writing this in your own notebook, you can title it Carbohydrates. If you got the note packet, it's already titled for you. If we take a look at a picture of these carbohydrates, all of these molecules here are carbohydrates. And I want you to tell me, what letters do you see in all three of these molecules? You probably said C, H, O. So carbohydrates contain C, which is for carbon, H for hydrogen, O for oxygen. And typically we see that for every one carbon, there are two hydrogens and one oxygen. In our previous unit, we talked about glucose. Glucose is C6H12O6. So 6 C's, 12 H's, and 6 O's, 1:1 ratio. Another way to think of this is that there's 2 times as many H's as there are C's and O's. So if we take a look at some of these formulas, which of these formulas would be carbohydrates? In other words, which of them have a roughly 1:2:1 ratio? We can see that C6H12O6 is 1:1, okay? C3H6O3, 1:1. And then this one down here is close, but not quite. And we're going to talk about this one. This one is a carbohydrate. We'll talk about that one a little bit later. But it is a carbohydrate. It doesn't have to be exactly 1:1, but it's close. So carbohydrates are made out of building blocks. Remember when we talked about DNA and we said the building block is a nucleotide? The building block of a carbohydrate is something else. It is a monosaccharide. Mono means one, saccharide means sugar. So I have written here, go ahead and draw a hexagon. A hexagon has 6 sides. Typically sugars have six-sided hexagon. Just draw a little hexagon shape. This is literally all we're drawing. We're not adding anything to it. But typically you'll see them in the shape of a hexagon. Now, when we talk about carbohydrates, there are different kinds of carbohydrates. There are simple sugars, or sometimes we call them simple carbs, simple carbohydrates. And these are ones that are really simple and small, and they're used for quick energy. So simple sugars, what are some examples? Monosaccharides, mono means one, so 1 hexagon, or disaccharides, 2 hexagons. So they're used for quick energy. So if we take a look at all the foods down here, they are really sweet, sugary stuff, and usually stuff with simple sugars tastes sweet. You might be looking at the French fries and the bread thinking that that doesn't taste sweet. They don't have as many simple sugars, but we'll talk more about those later. Complex sugars, okay, big carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates. So big ones, poly means many, so many hexagons connected together. And one of those examples of many hexagons connected together is starch. If you're like, Ms. Frankson, there are so many big words here, don't worry. We're going to review them a ton. All you need to know is mono means 1 hexagon, di is 2 hexagons, poly, many hexagons. So complex carbs, these are things that don't typically taste super sweet. They're more like breads and pastas and wheat and potatoes. And they're used for energy storage. So they're able to give you energy a little bit longer. If you think about like a little kid eating a whole bunch of Halloween candy, they're going to get energy right away and then they're going to crash. Complex sugars like bread, potatoes, starches, they're not going to make you all super hyper. They're going to give you energy for a little bit later. So 1, 2, and 3, go ahead and label each one as a monosaccharide, a polysaccharide, or a disaccharide. So number 1 here is many hexagons. So this would be a polysaccharide. Number 2 is 1, so that'd be monosaccharide. And number 3 is 2, disaccharide. You'll notice here, this isn't actually a hexagon, it's a pentagon. Don't worry too much about that. Sometimes we'll see pentagons in here instead of hexagons. Just assume they're hexagons. Now we're going to talk about how we connect molecules together. So glucose, C6H12O6. If I connect 2 of these glucose molecules together, how many carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens am I going to have? You probably said you would have 12 C's, 24 H's, and 12 O's. But guess what? When we connect them together, instead of 12, 24, and 12, we end up getting 12, 22, and 11. So what's different between the left side and the right side? Notice the right side has 2 H's missing and 1 O missing. 2 H's and an O. Hey, we know what that is. H2O. So what happens here is when we connect molecules together, we remove water, H2O. And make sure you write this down. You can see in this picture, the little red OH and the H are going to get removed, and then that's where the 2 molecules are connected together. So to connect molecules, we need to remove water. Now, if we want to do the opposite, if we've got a molecule that's already connected together, we can do the reverse. Instead of removing water, we add water. Sometimes you'll hear some fancy words for this, but adding water is called hydrolysis. Removing water is called dehydration synthesis. So we need to figure out now, we're going to go back to carbohydrates. We said carbohydrates have C's, H's, and O's. They don't have any other letters, and they're typically a hexagon. So there's one carbohydrate here. I need you to tell me which one of these is a carbohydrate. So letter A is a carbohydrate because it has C's, H's, and O's, and it's a hexagon. Now, I need you to tell me, is this a monosaccharide, a disaccharide, or a polysaccharide? You should have told me that this is a monosaccharide because it is 1 hexagon. Mono means 1. Let's do another one. Tell me, which letters are carbohydrates? There are 2 here. Yeah, B and C are carbohydrates because B and C have C's, H's, and O's and have a hexagon. And so if you had to tell me, is this a monosaccharide, a disaccharide, or a polysaccharide, what would you tell me? This is a polysaccharide because it has many hexagons connected together. So the next thing, what foods contain carbohydrates? If we take a look, this is a picture of foods that have carbohydrates in them. All right. So if you want to, what I would like you to do is go ahead, pick 3 or 4 of these foods, write them down as examples in your notes. The last thing we're going to go over is how do we test for carbohydrates in, let's say, a food or a solution. All right. So here's how we test for a polysaccharide. Remember, polysaccharide is many hexagons. So if we want to test for starch, starch is a big carbohydrate, we can use the iodine test, which we already know. We've tested for starch. If it's present, the solution will turn purple or black. And we know this. You've seen this with when we added starch to a parsnip root, to a leaf. If the starch is absent, the solution's gonna turn yellow or stay the same color. The reason I said turn yellow is because iodine itself is yellowish orange. So if you're putting iodine in water, it's gonna turn it yellowish orange. But let's say you have like a red solution, it's probably gonna stay red. So this will test for complex carbs or starches. These are things that don't really taste sweet. Things like breads and pasta have them in them. And then how do we test for a simple sugar? Simple sugars are monosaccharide or disaccharide. Remember, these are typically things that taste sweet. We use something called Benedict's solution, or we can just say Benedict's test. Just write the test name down. We will do these tests tomorrow, but basically the solution itself is blue. So you put the solution in and then you heat it up, and sometimes it'll turn green, sometimes it'll turn orange, sometimes it'll turn red. We're gonna watch a quick video of this, maybe, maybe not. We're not gonna watch a quick video of this. So what happens then is if there's the simple sugar present, when you heat it up, it's going to turn green, orange, or red. And if it's absent, the solution stays blue because that's what color the solution is. So let's do a practice scenario then. Okay, Sally crushes up some bread in a test tube. She adds iodine and gets the following result. Does the bread contain starch? Tell me yes or no. This would be yes because the iodine turned purplish black. She then takes the test tube and adds Benedict's solution. She heats it up, gets the following result. Does the bread contain simple sugars? And because it remained blue, we should say you should have gotten no, it does not contain simple sugars. So that's it. We've got carbohydrates, right? CHO, hexagon. They can be broken into two categories. Simple ones that give us quick energy, or complex ones that give us a little bit longer energy.